What's up, y'all? Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hello and welcome. Today's video is going to be a ranking of the last 10 indie eyeshadow palettes that I have tried. Every single one of these, I have created multiple different looks. I've used every shade in these palettes at least one time, and I am ready to give you my final thoughts. I will have all these palettes listed and linked down below in the description box, as well as what I am wearing on my face today. I did film this look. It should already be up on my channel as a short, but it will be down in that description box. So per usual, if you're ever curious about anything I use in any of my videos here on my channel, always check the description box. I squeeze as much information as I possibly can into that tiny little space. But let's go ahead and get this party started. Alright, y'all, so kicking things off at number 10, we have the Lethal Cosmetics Dexter Collab Palette. And if I were to rank all of these based off of packaging and theming, this would hands down be number 1 because Lethal did such a good job with this collection as a whole. I mean, look at the packaging of the eyeshadow palette. It is themed around Dexter's blood slide box, and to me, it doesn't get any cooler than that. And the color story in here is 100% on theme. I love the shade names in here. I love the attention to detail with this palette, and the formula in here is incredible. This is such a good matte formula in here. I find them to be pigmented, very easy to blend out and work with. I never get any patching, skipping, or fallout, and the shimmers in here are incredibly beautiful on the lid. They are high shine, super reflective. We do have some in here that are a little bit more textured and flaky and you can get fallout with, but as far as wear time goes, I never have any issues with this palette. The only reason I'm putting it at number 10 is because this is not my favorite color story, and if I'm being completely honest, if this had not been a Dexter themed eyeshadow palette, I would have skipped out on it without any hesitation because I'm just not the person to reach into a palette that has a lot of reds or a lot of cool tone grays in it. I like reds, but I like them mixed with other colors, and grays I'm kind of sort of still coming around to. So for me, it's a color story preference. It has nothing to do with formula, packaging, theming, or anything like that. Coming in at the number 9 spot is the Just Desserts palette from Ladybug Glow in collaboration with Eyescream Beauty Box. This is such a fun little palette. It is one of 2 that was featured in the January box, and this one is beautiful. I really like the shade selection in here. I just wish that we had some lighter tones in here. So for me, just like the one from Lethal Cosmetics, it's a color story issue, but I do gravitate more towards this than I do that. I just have to use this more as a companion palette. I have to bring in something from another palette to kind of lighten things up, smoke things out, soften edges, and give me the gradient that I personally look for in my looks. But the formula in here is beautiful. I don't have any issues with them building up, blending out. I don't have any issues with fallout, patching, skipping, or wear time, and the shimmers in here are beautiful as well. This shade right here, more in particular, is incredibly beautiful. I don't normally do swatches like this, but I just love this shade so much, and it's beautiful on the lid. It has this really pretty kind of salmony gold pinky flip to it. Very unique in my collection, and I absolutely love it. But like I said, this is more of a companion palette for me, so that's the only reason that it's coming in where it is. At the number 8 spot, we have the Graggle Chat palette from Titanium Foxes, and this one is so beautiful. But again, just like the palette preceding it, it just doesn't go light enough for my fair skin. I do think the color story in here is absolutely beautiful, but it's going to be more of a companion palette for me. But I really think this is unique with the mix of cool, grungy leaning tones with some pops of warmth in here. The matte formula is gorgeous in this palette. I have really been enjoying Titanium Foxes as a whole. I never have any issues with the mattes. They build up, blend out really nicely. They never emphasize texture. They don't fade throughout the day. I never get any patching or skipping. I can get a little bit of fallout if I go in too heavy-handed with some of the deeper shades in here. So I just always make sure that my under eyes are powdered really well because it just kind of wipes away. But the shimmers in this palette are just some of my absolute favorites from the brand. They are so intense, sparkly, and reflective on the lid. They are very smooth. They never accentuate texture. In fact, her formula and all of her palettes are formulated with more mature lids in mind, and that is something I really appreciate. But this shade right here, more specifically, is an absolute favorite. It looks a little kind of boring in the pan, but it is insanely beautiful. So again, I'm gonna do another little swatch. I don't normally do a lot of these, but look at how gorgeous that shade is. It is so rich and smooth and reflective, and it's one of my favorites from the brand. So I do really love this palette, but unfortunately I have to bring in something else from my personal preferences to create cohesive looks. At the number 7 spot, we have the Vampy Treat palette, also from Ladybug Glow in collaboration with Eyescream Beauty Box. And just like its counterpart, the Just Desserts palette, the formula in here is beautiful. So I'm not going to stay on it too long because I have the same things to say about the formula in this palette that I did about that one. And while this is a deeper color story, it does have enough lighter shades in here that I can get the kind of looks that I prefer to wear on my eyes and that I am comfortable with. And it really comes down to these 3 shades right here. They do look a little bit deeper in the pan, but if I go in with a lighter hand, I can really kind of buff them out and get a softer look with them. And this shade are my absolute 2 favorite in this palette. I just think they are so insanely beautiful. And this shimmer is so pretty on the inner corner. I mean, it just adds the most beautiful pop of color. In fact, I really like to pair this palette with the Just Desserts palette. I think that one gives me more of a color story that I am comfortable with wearing on the daily, but this is a ranking. Things kind of have to go somewhere, so that's why this one is going where it is. But again, the formula in both of the palettes is beautiful across the board. It just comes down to color story. Coming in at number 6, we have the Monk palette from Fantasy Cosmetica, and this one I think is absolutely gorgeous. It is very monochromatic orange and yellow, don't get me wrong, which I know isn't for everybody, but this is really unique. We don't see a lot of color stories like this, and personally, I like brown and orange and brown and yellow together. I think they make a beautiful, almost neutral leaning look with just a little added pop of color. And while it is very monochromatic, you can get a lot of variety with the looks in here depending on how you place the mattes and which shimmers you bring in. But the matte formula in here is incredible. It is very much so on par with the Harvest of Souls palette that they brought out last year, which was my number 1 favorite palette of 2024. Fantasy Cosmetica has really stepped up their matte formula, and it is just so easy to work with. They are pigmented. I never have any issues with patching, skipping, fallout, blending them out. They don't fade throughout the day. They just look beautiful no matter what. And the shimmers in here are incredibly beautiful as well. They are what we have come to know and love from Fantasy Cosmetica. They are high shine, super impactful, smooth. They don't accentuate texture. They don't crease on me. I can get a little bit of fallout if I don't prime my eye with like a glitter primer or spray my brush, but that's pretty much typical. But I really love this color story. I wasn't really sure how I felt about it when I got it, but now that I've played around with it a little bit, I have really fallen in love with this palette. But the reason that I'm putting it at number 6 is because it is more monochromatic, so you're not going to get quite as much variety with this palette as you will with the ones ahead of it. All right, we have entered the top 5, and any of these could be number 1, but this is just based off of the mood and what I'm feeling right now. So coming in at number 5 is going to be the Midnight Haze palette from Blair MUA Cosmetics, and this one actually came out like the end of 2024, but I didn't get around to it until we got back from vacation, and I'm just now getting around to an eyeshadow palette ranking, so it is what it is. But this color story, y'all, it is a me color story. I love it so much. Blair has a beautiful formula. I loved it since I tried the Hunter and the Prey palette that he came out with last year, and this one I love even more, and it's mostly because of the shade selection in here. But his mattes are really easy to work with. They're more buildable in pigmentation, which I personally look for. I like it when I can control the pigmentation on my lids without having to get too far away from me and having to kind of wrangle it back in. And the shimmers in here are beautiful as well. Very smooth, very flattering on the eyes. I don't get any creasing with these as long as I prime my lid with a glitter primer. If I don't, I can get a little bit of creasing, but I do have very oily eyelids, and these are a little bit more on the emollient side. They're not super emollient like anything that we've seen from like Bella Beauty Bar or even Adept, but they're not super dry in texture is what I'm saying. But this is a beautiful color story, and I absolutely love this palette. He killed it with this one, and actually he is coming out with something very soon. I don't know what it is. I just know that it's happening sooner rather than later. Coming in at number 4 is the Nomad Cosmetics Chamonix Après Ski eyeshadow palette, and this is a beautiful pastel color story. I really like the combination of the cool tones and the warm tones in here with the added pops of blues for the shimmers. I think it brings a lot of depth and variety to this palette, and speaking of depth, I love that they gave us this row of darker shades up here. That way you can kind of amp up your looks and make it to where it's not so flat and one note as far as pastels go. I do wish we had a little bit more depth in this row over here, but I can bring in this shade and really kind of deepen up the outer corner and smoke it out if I want to. And the formula in here is beautiful. Nomad is another brand that has really amped up their formula over the past year or so. I've always found their mattes pretty easy to work with, but I find these to be even easier to blend out and work with. I don't have to work quite as hard as I did before. I've never had any issues with like patching, skipping, fallout, or fading throughout the day. There's just something about these that they're more elevated and a little easier to work with, but the shimmers is really where they have been shining over the past few launches. They are really high shine, very impactful on the lid, nice and sparkly. They're not pressed glitters or textured or anything like that. They just look so beautiful and reflective on the lid, very flattering. They don't accentuate texture. I never have any issues with creasing, and they have been bringing us some more like duochromes and things like that. We haven't seen a whole lot of multi-chromes, but I'm okay with that. I still think these are absolutely beautiful, and I've really been having a good time with this palette. Alright y'all, so the top three was really hard, and I actually just rearranged these again. I feel like I always kind of rearrange my top 3 or 4 palettes, but coming in at number 3 is going to be the Indigo Dreams palette from a new indie brand, Poppy and Fluff, and this is so beautiful. I really love the shade selection in here. It's very bright and colorful, but it's not super chaotic. It's very cohesive, and the shades in here are very buildable. I will say that this shade right here is a lot more lightly pigmented than you would think it is. You can build it up, you just have to build up a little bit more. I personally like to use this as like a pop on the inner corner. I find if I use it as like a transition shade or a blending out shade, it just doesn't quite give me the pop that I want, but it is still really pretty. And I can mix it in with a little bit of this black shade and deepen it up if I want to, which is another thing that I do really like about this palette, is the fact that it has a black in here to deepen up the existing shades or bring a little bit of depth to the outer corner. But while the matte formula in here is incredibly beautiful and easy to work with, it's the shimmers in here that really kind of did it for me. I wasn't expecting anything super shifty or high shine. I was just expecting really impactful metallics from this palette, but I was pleasantly surprised to see how gorgeous these are. Like this shade right here and this one, they are insanely beautiful, shifty, reflective, smooth on the lid. They don't emphasize texture. I don't get any creasing with these, whether I use a glitter primer or I don't. I always use an eyeshadow primer, but I don't feel like I need to have that sticky base to get these to stay on my lid all day. I have really been enjoying this palette. It is so much fun. I love the looks that I've created, and I cannot wait to see the direction that this brand goes with in the future. So coming in at the number 2 spot is the Bitten palette from Gourmande Girls. Now in all transparency, this palette was gifted to me. I am on the PR list. I'm affiliated with the brand and I do have a code, but this color story is my jam, y'all. It is everything that I want from a monochromatic leaning purple palette. It's got some more berry tones in here. We've got a pop of red. We do have a couple of grays in here, which aren't my absolute favorite, but I do appreciate them mixed in with this color story because I really feel like they add the variety that I want from a palette. But I like that this goes from really light to really dark with all the shades in between. The matte formula is incredible. It's exactly what I know and love from the brand. It's very easy to work with, not overly pigmented, but they're not also super buildable in pigmentation. They're kind of somewhere in between, but very easy to blend out and manipulate on the lid. I can get a little bit of fallout with the deeper shades in this palette, again, if I go in too heavy-handed. So just like some of the other palettes, I always make sure that my under eyes are powdered really well so I can avoid that. But the shimmers in here are incredibly beautiful as well. They are shifty. We've got some holochromes in here. I love the addition of this lighter shade as like an inner corner, a brow bone. I can even use it as a highlighter, and I also like to tap it on the center of my lid to give it added extra like little spotlight moment. But I think she did a beautiful job curating this color story, and if I want to play with a purple palette, this is like one of the first one that comes to mind for me. So if you're not into like purples and berry tones, you're probably not going to like this palette. It has nothing to do with the formula. Just keep in mind that this all comes down to my color story preferences and what I look for in a palette, but I have really been enjoying this one, and this is probably a favorite of mine from the brand. All right, y'all, so coming in at number 1 is the Adept Minka Remastered palette, and I think this is probably the first time I've ever had an Adept palette at number 1 or even this high up in a ranking, and that's simply because I'm usually not a big fan of their matte formula, but the matte formula in here is so good. I feel like they have really amped it up and just made it so much more user-friendly. I don't get any patching in these shades, especially with these darker ones down here, and that's usually where I get a lot of patching and difficulty specialty from Adept. But I found these to be very easy to work with. They're definitely more buildable in pigmentation, so you're not going to get the full impact that you see in the pan on your eye like upon first application. But like I've said before, I appreciate a more buildable formula, but the color story in here is beautiful. We've got some beautiful purple mattes in here, and the shimmers are incredibly beautiful. I have always loved the Adept shimmer formula, and even though I haven't always gotten along with their matte formula, it's always been the shimmers that brings me back for more. They give you such unique, shifty, shimmery, beautiful shades, very reflective, very smooth. Some of them can be a little bit more textured and chunky, but they go on the lid just really nicely. I can get fallout if I don't go in with like a tacky base on my eye, or if I don't spray my brush, which I usually always do all of that. But if you're someone who doesn't, I just kind of want to let you know that. But this palette is beautiful. I never had the original Minka palette just because it didn't have as much variety as I wanted. Even though I'm not a big fan of their mattes, I wanted a little bit more, and this is definitely giving that. I also love the new packaging from Adept as well. It's definitely giving Natasha Denona, but honestly, this is actually a whole lot nicer. It feels sturdier. It doesn't squeak when I open it. It stays open, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I'm really loving the direction that the Adept is going, and I have absolutely loved this palette. It is the one that I am wearing on my eyes today. I always like to kind of wear one of the palettes in the ranking when I do these, but I've really enjoyed this palette. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and again, another new favorite from the brand. But that is going to complete this eyeshadow palette ranking. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. Let me know if you have any of these palettes, if any of them are on your wish list, what you thought of my ranking, what would be your #1 palette. I want to know it all. Let's have that conversation. Light up that comment section. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching my video and spending your time with me. It truly does mean so much to me. And if you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up before you leave. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click on that notification bell so that you can be notified of all my future posts here on my channel. I do post quite a few videos every single week, and I wouldn't want you to miss one. But until my next video, have a good one. Bye.